came back to join us tonight. I've got a few things to do here in the way of paperwork, make sure everything's good. And I want to share my screen. Here, no, there we go. There we go. I got to share my screen. Screen share. Share. This is what our screens looks like, guys. We've got like all sorts of stuff that we have to watch to make sure that we're monitoring. Meanwhile, Tolga's got another screen yet that he's monitoring with the YouTube stuff over there. So we're all monitoring away. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to show you this. And we'll go with welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Today's program is going to be with Kerry-Ann Lecky Hepburn. We met Kerry again at NEAC, and she showed us some wonderful, wonderful pictures, and I knew that I would like to have her on the Astro Imaging channel for everybody to see. And we'll get back to Kerry in a minute or two. We've got some, preliminaries to get through. If you go to the website, you'll notice if you're already watching the program live with us, that's one thing. But if you're new to this and you don't know how we work, you go to theastroimagingchannel.com or testingtheastroimagingchannel.com. We're trying to get rid of the testing, but we don't know how yet. Anyway, if you go to theastroimagingchannel.com, you'll see the front page that looks about like this, okay? And this whole front page has today's show running down here, and that's a cool thing to, if you want to see that, and we'll be watching that. We have a series of programs coming up for you. We're scheduled pretty well. We're even scheduled past this September 15th time now with some other people. So tonight we're going to have Kerry-Ann, and next week we'll have Hamza come on in and tell us about the software that and some. I think he's going to be talking about how to plan your imaging sessions and selecting some targets and things like that next week. Although he hasn't gotten back to me with the actual title of it yet. The week after that, well, we'll talk about the processing workshop in a minute, but then we've got a few other people coming on, and here we go. The workshop, if you go to the website and you take this last link over here in the upper right hand corner, you'll come up with this page. I've enlarged it a little bit here for you to see. Terry's donated his data for us, and you can go click on this link right here, NGC 1968 Robeson, and import it. We've got a couple of people, and this is going slow, guys. We need your help. We need you guys to process this. If you're not processing it for a reason, if you've looked at it and not processed it, would you tell us a little bit about it? We were planning on having one of these processing sessions once every month or 6 weeks. And we had some real good response last time around. And this time around, we've had only 2. Is anybody having difficulties, like after they processed it, it didn't upload or something? There was some mess ups earlier on, but I think Adam Jaffe stepped in and fixed it all for us, so everything was better. Going on to the next slide, when Tolga get ready, I'm going to ask you to share your screen and show them a little bit about the YouTube thing in a minute, okay? If you want to join the conversation, you're very much encouraged to do that, and there's 2 ways to do it. One way is when you're watching down here in the in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see this green and white circle with the number of people in it, stuff like that. If you click on that, this screen will come up. It's called Rumble Talk, and you can go ahead and type your message in down here and get all sorts of information to everybody else. There's also another way to do it that we actually prefer, and we wish you would all migrate over to here so we can decide not to do Rumble Talk anymore. It costs us some money and stuff like that. Tolga, would you go ahead and say something about what you do with YouTube?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see?
I'm still on my PowerPoint screen. Somebody else in the room can tell him if he's okay.
So if you guys type Astro Imaging Channel on the search bar on YouTube, you will get to our page. And then if you click on today's video, you will see a chat bar on the right over here. And you will see a subscribe button and a bell button. So you want to subscribe to our channel and then click on the bell to be notified when there's a new video. And then you also be notified when we go live. And you could also chat, send us messages, ask, in this case, Kerry, questions, and we will relay those messages to Kerry live. And then I also added a new feature over here. There's a little $ over here. It says show your support for the Astro Imaging channel. We'll appreciate your support. That's about it.
Yeah, and one of the ways you can support us is by subscribe. There's some things we could do with YouTube and the channel itself that we can't do until that subscribe number gets up to 10,000. And we're only at about 7,300 right now. So we would appreciate. If you're looking back at my screen, you'll see that one of the advantages of this is that the comments that are made are kept with the program. So as people are watching the program, they can actually see the comments that various people made and the kinds of questions they were asking and things like that. Okay, next we've got some people that are friends of the show, and we like putting in a good word for them. Warren Keller and Ron Brecher. Ron was here just a little 6 weeks ago. They're coming to Chicagoland. So anybody who's in Chicago area certainly going to want to get in on that. They do a really good show. I think it's a 2-day show now. But at any rate, if you go to ip4ap.com and check them out, they do a good show. But tonight's show is from Kerry-Ann Lecky Hepburn is with us tonight, and she's going to tell us about what happens when the clouds come and you still want to take good pictures. So I'm going to turn this all back over to Kerry. And Kerry, start talking.
Okay. Can you see me on the screen?
We can see
okay,
you so
I see
far.
myself there. Okay, I'll do a screen share.
Okay. There you are. You're good.
Oh, it's sharing. Okay.
Yeah.
Your entire
The actual feed is about 5 to 15 seconds behind the live feed.
Okay.
So
can you see?
You are definitely showing on. Now you're screen sharing.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So there's the slideshow. Can you see that?
Go ahead and play your show.
Okay, it's playing. Is that good? Can you see it?
No, we've got your picture showing. Try sharing your screen again.
Okay, let's see. Sorry about this.
Okay, now you're sharing your screen, but you don't have you're sharing your screen, but you don't have the PowerPoint
see it.
running.
You know what? It was a little bit behind. Okay, let's try this now.
There we go. When it rains, it shines. Okay.
F5, because that's what Tolga said. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So I can hide this, I guess. All right.
Yep, you're full screen. You're ready to go.
Okay, great. Everything's good?
Yeah.
All right, guys. So yeah, my topic is when it rains, it shines, and night sky photography under adverse conditions. And basically the talk is, the purpose of this is to show you how how you can take your best images when the conditions are not ideal. I'll use some examples with deep sky and nightscape as well, because I take both of them. So this is a visible and infrared satellite loop of the Western Hemisphere. And I'm showing you this just so you can get an appreciation of just how challenging it is with our hobby, where we are trying to take pictures of space. And there's clouds in the way. There's all kinds of things in the way of us getting a nice clear view. And a lot of those things too, you can't even see on this satellite image. And if we're waiting for the perfect conditions, we might not end up getting any images at all. But we should all try to push through and embrace the creative process. We have to learn to work with what we are dealt with sometimes, basically. And in the end, I truly believe that when you are faced with less than ideal conditions and you're trying to create your best image, you will basically become a better imager overall. And for me, even as a meteorologist, I can sometimes maximize my chances for getting better conditions. when it involves weather, but sometimes that doesn't always work out. I mean, there's weather systems that are really large and you just can't get around it. You can't get around all these conditions. So basically, yeah, in this presentation, I just hope to encourage many of you to not be scared to go out and take pictures and just, you know, do your best and try to find some kind of creativity out of what you're dealing with. So basically, we have different challenges with different seasons, and especially in North America, this is mainly for North America. In the summer, we have thunderstorms. We also have haze. We've got smoke and high temperatures to deal with. As you know, like the higher the temperature is on your sensor, the more noise you're going to get. In the fall, we also have our large, intense lows, and that creates windier conditions, and that poses a great challenge for imaging as well. And we also have dew and frost issues in the fall. They're more prevalent in the fall and tends to be more wet. Like we get a lot more rain in the fall season. Winter, for instance, especially in the Great Lakes, we get a lot of lake effect, a lot of low clouds and snowstorms. And spring in our area tends to be on the drier side. We get less clouds as well. But in this talk, I'll deal mainly with adverse conditions, as in like seeing problems, transparency issues, smoke aloft. I'm going to talk a little bit about airglow and clouds, extreme heat, and also sky darkness, which is more, you know, either seasonal issue or man-made, such as light pollution.
Okay, Kerry, before you go on,
Yeah.
you are sharing your screen.
Yes.
And are you seeing your screen as full screen, or is your presenter's notes pages?
I see the presenter's of those.
Okay, because we're seeing the presenter's notes.
Okay.
And you're sharing them with everybody.
All right. Okay, what
Okay.
do I do?
Whatever
Okay,
you want to do. It's up to you.
All right. I'll get rid of the presenter's notes.
Okay.
Let's see. I just have some notes here, for instance, like you know, exposures, times and stuff like that I probably should talk about too. That I might need to look at. Okay, let me just see how I can do this. So basically, this is a map from Environment Canada. If you go to the weather.ec.gc.ca page, they have some maps that they curtailed for astronomers. And this map here is showing you the seeing conditions. And basically with the seeing, that can affect so many aspects of our astro imaging, mainly in planetary imaging, but also deep sky as well. And deep sky in terms of like seeing a lot more resolution in smaller objects like your galaxies. So that can be a problem. And as you can see, like on this map, certain areas that have really good seeing conditions are along the coastal areas, like Florida, for instance. Can you see my mouse cursor? Can you see the mouse?
Yes, we can see the mouse is down in Florida.
Okay. All right, cool. So yeah, in Florida, for instance, they tend to get really nice seeing conditions, and that's because of the stable air. Anytime you get more of a breeze off of the ocean, you get that more stable conditions. In the morning, you get stable conditions. Here in the Great Lakes, we tend to get a lot less good quality seeing, and you can see along the Pacific Ocean, they typically get really good seeing conditions. And there are some really good observatories along the coast of the Pacific as well. And that's partly because the conditions are really good and it's drier as well. And here's just an example of an image, two images that I took, short period of time. And this is from a deep sky target. I believe it was M51. And with M51, through the night, I had like a lot of varying changes in seeing. And you can tell like with this star being smaller over here, that's like better seeing. And then the star tends to get really larger when you get worse seeing conditions. And then what I wanted to talk about was with M51, that's basically one of my favorite targets. And I've been trying to image it almost every year to try to get a better result. And as you know, this poses some kind of challenge when it comes to seeing as well, because you we need to see a lot of fine detail in the target. But mind you, in 2007, as you can see over here, this was one of my first images, and I was so excited to get that kind of result with just three frames stacked together. And that was when I was just starting to figure out how stacking works and figure out all this deep sky imaging at a more serious level. So when you start out, you do what you can, and this is the best result that I got. But then in the summer, I tried it again of 2007, and you can see there's a little bit better as well. And then 2008, a little bit better, and you just keep trying to get a better image each time. And part of it is the processing process. Like as you learn more, you gain you gain that ability to be able to process your image to a higher level. But also equipment can help as well. But in this next case, I'll just show you how basically processing was what helped me a lot. And with being in the Great Lakes, I have pretty poor seeing conditions. So it's about 4 arc seconds per pixel is typically my seeing conditions, which isn't good. But and some people might even want to give up on taking these kind of deep sky objects where you're trying to get fine detail. But if you do some processing and really learn some more processing skills, you can really extract a lot of detail out of the image and then get something really good that battles against that poor seeing condition that you have. So what you're looking at right now is the RGB of M51. And M51, you can see it's pretty washed out and the color's not very good. But the way how I process my LRGB images is I do it kind of the old-fashioned way. So I'll have my RGB, which I will combine, and then and set that as a color layer, and then I will have my luminance, which I will add on top and add that as a luminance layer. So with RGB, I could do a whole lot of stuff to it to extract color. And I'm not worrying about detail or anything. I'm just focusing on trying to get the color out. And then here is the luminance that I was able to get. And with that, you can see a lot more detail. And then adding that luminance on top of the RGB, I can bring in that color. Oh, actually, what I'm trying to show you here, can you see a difference here? This one is pre-sharpened. This is just luminance, just basic processing of the luminance. And then here I did a little bit more sharpening, and I use Smart Sharpen, and also Camera Raw in Photoshop does a really amazing job with sharpening the details as well. And then here I was able to bring in the RGB and get this nice color, a better color image as well. And then basically I also found that a little trick is that if you add a bit of a glow to your nightscapes, it simulates, or it gives you the impression of higher resolution. Like if we start processing our image to have too much contrast, it kind of gives the impression of low res. But then when you're smoothing things out just a little bit more and you're really careful with how you smooth it, or you're adding a bit of a glow layer, then it helps to give the viewer a little bit more of an illusion of more detail. So for instance, with the glow layer, it could be just simply just a slight Gaussian blur, and then you add that Gaussian blur layer in a luminance mode, and then you can lower the opacity of it just so you can see the fine detail. So that's the final image here. And just to show you the before and after. So this is before, just the color, and then after with some processing with Smart Sharpen and using Camera Raw sharpening tools and doing it in a very selective way. and also adding a bit of a glow to the image really helped out a lot. And this was got the NASA APOD in 2017. Transparency now, that can be a big problem as well, especially for deep sky imagers and when you're trying to get objects that are extremely faint and dust especially. So this target here in Pegasus, this galaxy, has a lot of dust. And from throughout the course of the night, you could see that there's a huge change in transparency, where you can see, I don't know if you can see on the screen very well, but there's more detail in the second frame than there is in the first frame. And Environment Canada issues some transparency maps, so you can see just how transparent your night sky is. A lot of the times when we're looking up at the night sky, we might think that it's perfectly clear, but there could be a lot of high cloud in the way. Unfortunately, this transparency map that they issue doesn't show smoke aloft. It's just, or any type of like dust particles in the atmosphere. It's mainly just related to moisture. But for me, at home, we have a sky quality meter. And what I do is when I'm imaging, I keep an eye on this, on the readings that I get. And basically, I'm measuring the sky. The sky quality meter measures the sky darkness. And you can see like little dips in the curve. And basically, if there aren't any lights going on, sometimes those dips indicate cloud, like really thin, high cloud. And thin high cloud can really ruin things for your individual frames for your deep sky images. And so basically what I find I have to do is I will go back looking at the sky quality meter readings, and I can then pick out certain time periods where I had some problems with transparency and weed those frames out of my final my calibration. And so basically with this particular target, I had to weed out a fair amount of data. And a lot, actually what I do for that too is sometimes I'll use the blink tool in PixInsight. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but with that, it also helps you to be able to see easily when you come across a frame that's not perfectly ideal. So now this is a stacked image, and I believe this is just the luminance field, and I actually got quite a bit of data here, 5 hours, and I usually do 10-minute subs. But this target is extremely faint. The dust is extremely faint here. And processing that now, you could see the dust appearing a little bit more. And then,
Kerry,
yes?
hi.
Mhm.
Could you tell us a little bit about the equipment you're using? And
Oh, yeah.
maybe we've got some other questions over in YouTube. I think we're pretty clear over in the
Yeah,
Rumble
for
Talk.
sure. So basically, I'm using a Ritchie Gretchen that's an 8-inch, and on and the SBIG 8300, and it's a mono camera. And I typically do 10-minute subs for this.
Okay.
Oh, and I'm on an EQ6 Pro mount.
Thank you. Do we have anything from the YouTube over there?
Kerry just answered. That was the question. I guess she was looking at the question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So in this case here, I didn't have that much color data. I only had an hour for each channel, R, G, and B, but I had about 5 hours of luminance data. But with careful extraction of those frames that were not transparent, that were not very good quality, I was able to not pollute my final image, my final stacked image. And you know, that's basically, you know, what we're trying to do. And yeah, just carefully looking through all your sub images and keeping an eye on the weather really helps with that, like the satellite imagery. If you don't have something like a sky quality meter, keep your eyes on the satellite imagery. And if you're looking at infrared, for instance, satellite, you can see the high cloud very well. And you'll see it better than if you were to go outside and just look up, because even with very thin high cloud, you will still see the stars and everything. The night could look perfectly fine, but it's not, especially. And so when you're dealing with these kinds of targets that are really faint, you need to know that whether you're polluting your frames or not. So now with smoke aloft, now this is a big problem in the summer, and this was basically last year. It's if you're not used to looking at satellite imagery, it might be hard to see the smoke, but you can see like this is all cloud. This is a large large low that's moving into the Great Lakes, but all this wispy kind of brownish gray stuff is smoke. And you could see it's everywhere where basically you would expect to see clear skies. So that's quite a problem. But the thing is, there's some advantages to smoke aloft, and you can get the most beautiful sunrises and sunsets. This is one shot that I took where we knew that we're going to have smoke aloft for many days, and the sky was going to be clear. So we planned out a little trip to a location where we could catch the sunrise behind the Burlington Skyway Bridge. And we use tools such as photographer's ephemeris and photo pills in order to get images like this and line ourselves up properly. And ideally, it would have been nice to get the sun in a slightly different location, but like right underneath or right above. But it's funny when you start to look at the sunrise times, you're just thinking of like where the sun is going to be right at the horizon, but then it's always too low and then it moves across pretty fast. And also, like, surprisingly, I found with the moon, you can get some amazing color in the moon with smoke aloft. And this was just a single shot with the 80 millimeter telescope and I believe it's my Canon 40D. And what I was surprised that this was beside Mars. And you could see, like with Mars, I was able to capture some detail in there, which was surprising for 80 millimeter telescope at essentially 500 millimeters of focal length. And so anyways, this case now, basically in the summer, I wanted to go to California, and the trip was already planned to go to Sequoia National Park. And the thing is that I couldn't control the weather, obviously. So we had a situation where there were forest fires all along the West Coast, right up into Canada. And of course, I wanted to take pictures of the Milky Way, and that wasn't going to. I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to see the Milky Way at all under those conditions. But of course, with the trip already planned, you can't really do anything about it. And then the problem too with in California during that time, this was in August, the upper level pattern. This is a picture of a snapshot of the 500 millibar pattern. This is like about 10 kilometers up in the atmosphere, and it shows you the wind pattern. And these are ISO text, which basically shows you areas of equal height. And it's kind of analogous to the wind flow. So wherever it's tightly packed, you get higher wind speeds, and whenever these isoplex are further apart, you get lower wind speeds. So you can see the wind is a little bit higher aloft here, pushing across, going in this direction from west to east. And then down in California, there's not much wind flow at all. So of course, with this type of a pattern, the smoke isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. So it basically just sat in the area for many, many days, and even I think weeks. So with that, this is one of the images that I was able to take from Sequoia National Park. And this was just along the roadside. So you can see the Milky Way is really washed out. And this is supposed to be a really nice dark location, with the exception of the city lights across the West Coast there, looking towards Los Angeles. But this is basically a really dark location, but with the smoke aloft, there's very low contrast with the Milky Way. But with some handy tools in Lightroom and Photoshop, and bringing in some gradient filters, I was able to add a little bit of clarity and dehaze, and bump up the exposure just a little bit, and was able to get a little bit more contrast from the Milky Way. And then also another really nice tool in Lightroom and Photoshop Camera Raw is the radial filter. So with that, you can add a little bit more contrast as well. And here's a sort of a semi-finished image. And oh, these are Perseid meteors, by the way. And then here's the final image. And so basically, just with a little bit of extra work in post-processing, you can bring out the Milky Way under those conditions. And also, that's those same nights for the following like 3 days or so. The smoke, of course, stuck around, but in this particular shot here, you can see the Milky Way is arching in with the sequoia trees. And in the distance, there was a parking lot that had some light, which looked really cool, I thought, in this picture. So I composed it in such a way to add the light, or for the light in the parking lot to add some interest. But here you can see the Milky Way, it's even worse, like the contrast is even worse with that. But, you know, I felt, you know, it still added something to the image. And then here now, this location, on this particular night, we decide to go a little bit higher. And of course, smoke will tend to settle in the valleys after the smoke has been around for a while and it's just sitting there. It will eventually get lower down into the valleys. And so this particular location was fairly high, about 400 feet up. And so I was maybe around 3,000 feet above sea level. And with that, I was able to get a little bit better transparency for the Milky Way. So this shot here was taken with a 24 millimeter Sigma lens on my Canon 6D. And I did track this one. I believe this was maybe about a minute at ISO 6400. So with this particular shot, I also used the light pollution filter, but the light pollution filter mainly added a little bit of extra oomph to the red nebulosity. But and maybe a little bit of light pollution did take away a little bit of that. But the thing is, we still had some smoke, but it was a little bit better being higher up in altitude. And this is a valley, I think it's the Walking Valley. And then you could see the distant lights of Los Angeles. And then with that particular location, I figured, you know, I'm not going to waste this night. I'm going to take as many pictures as possible. So I did a 360 pano with my 14 millimeter lens. And this is like their 30-second exposures at ISO 6400. And I believe it's 16 frames. And with when you take panorama, it's so good because like you get so much versatility in the images that you can take. You can still see the smoke here, but we're going to work with that through processing. And then I put the 16 images into a software called PTGUI, and I was able to get so many different orientations. It's like you can take endless images when you start when you start taking panorama, especially 360 panorama. So I know this is a little bit crazy. So that was a tosser. But here's another cool rendition where the Milky Way is arching right across. And the reason why there's a black hole in the middle is because I forgot to take some frames down by my feet. And then here's another rendition. And here's another one. And eventually I settled on this kind of orientation with the Milky Way arching, you know, around with the tiny Earth kind of view, with the Milky Way arching across. And I was able to fill in the hole where my feet should have been with the content aware tool in Photoshop, and was able to get this image. And with the Perseid meteor shower as well. Perseid meteor. Actually, this particular night, the meteors weren't that great, but I caught one. And yeah, you can see the light pollution here. So even though the condition wasn't very good, just getting this really large scale view of the night sky helps to make things a little bit more interesting as well, especially when you're pointing higher up in the atmosphere where there's more transparency. And then here's another image looking straight up, and this is a tracked exposure that's probably a minute long, and you can see this is a summer triangle. And even though the contrast isn't very high, it's still, I thought it had kind of an interesting sort of look to it with the nice glowiness from some of the smoke. And then, so now the next problem that we face at night that many people actually don't really think about, and that's airglow. So this image here was taken
Kerry?
by your, yes.
Before we go to the next, can we take care of a couple of questions?
Yeah, sure.
So there's one question on YouTube. How do you measure sky quality? That's one question. Go ahead.
Oh, basically, I mean, for me, like sky quality can be so many different things. It could be cloud cover, air glow, haze, and for that you basically have to look at a whole number of tools. With my sky quality meter that I was just talking about, that particular device just measures how dark the sky is. And the company that made that device is called Unihedron. So if you're ever interested in getting something to see how dark your skies are, definitely check them out. So yeah, it's a sky quality meter for sky darkness. But other than that, basically you're going to be following the weather pattern, looking at satellite imagery, and things like that to figure out how good your sky is going to be. In this case, for airglow, you can't really predict it per se the night before, because some nights can be really active more than other nights. So especially in areas in Chile where the magnetosphere is not as strong, there tends to be more airglow. So basically, airglow is solar radiation that oh, are there any other questions? Is that it, Tolga?
I had a couple, but finish what you're saying, then I have a couple of questions for you.
Okay, all right. So basically, I'm talking about airglow. Basically, it's different from aurora in that this is dealing with solar radiation, and aurora is dealing with the solar wind. So with airglow, solar radiation will break up the oxygen molecules during the day, and basically at nighttime, the oxygen molecules will try to get back together again. And then in the process of getting back together, like the electrons getting back together and the molecule getting back together, it will then emit light. And that's what we see here with airglow. If you have a strong magnetosphere, then you won't get as much airglow in that area. But the nice thing, or well, I guess it's nice for some people, but some people don't appreciate the airglow. But the thing is that you can get airglow almost anywhere on the planet, unlike aurora, where it's concentrated more towards the poles. So anyway, Tolga, did you want to ask anything else?
Yeah, I had a question about a slide that you talked about. You had a Milky Way shot with a landscape, and you said you were tracking it.
Yes.
So I was going to ask you about the trick on how you can track the sky and still keep the landscape.
Okay, so in
blurred.
that case, what I did was I took a long exposure of the ground where it wasn't tracked, and then I took an exposure of the sky that was tracked. And then in Photoshop, you can blend the two layers together.
That's awesome.
Well, yeah, that's what I did for that. But for that panorama now, the 360 panorama, I didn't do tracking for that. Those were just single frames that were 30 seconds long. So.
And one more question just popped up as we were speaking. Ray asks, did you find any filters on any gear that helps remove any some of the bad weather? No.
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 I'm so sorry. Not unless we're the Hubble telescope and we can get above it. That would be nice. Yeah. So should I go forward, or are there any other questions?
Yes, you could continue.
Okay. So with airglow, it doesn't look like anything special. And like in this particular location, I was in the Canadian Rockies, and I was looking at the back of my camera display after I took this exposure, and I was thinking, what's going on? Like the Milky Way doesn't stand out that much. And when I was looking out as well with just my eyes, I couldn't really see a lot of like the dust lanes of the Milky Way. And it wasn't until I started processing the image that I figured out why. So here is what the image looked like. Oh, sorry. This is basically what the image looked like from a modified camera. And so it's a little bit more on the pinky purplish tint. But then color balance, this is what it looked like. And then from this picture, you can start to see the striations of the airglow. And then processed even further, it definitely stands out a lot more. So the thing is that a lot of photographers, they will look at this kind of like airglow and think that it's camera noise, because sometimes it really does look like camera noise, but it's not. You can definitely notice very strong patterns with it. And once you learn to recognize it, then you can embrace it. And you can get some really interesting and nice effects with airglow in the night sky. So here's another before and after. So this is a color balanced frame unprocessed. It just kind of looks messy and noisy. But then further processing, you could see there's definitely some red and green airglow. And then facing to the right in the same location, this is the Big Dipper, and you can see the airglow is a little bit stronger in this direction. So you can see how it can look really not very nice if you don't push it further in post-processing. I remember my daughter, she looked at this image and she thought it was wrong because she's so used to seeing like a sky that looks black or a little bit more bluish in color, and seeing like red and green just seems so unusual unless you're that you're looking at something like the aurora. And then here's another before and after. This is at railway tracks in the Rocky Mountains, and this is after. Oh, not totally done yet. Now this is done. So yeah, you can see there's some pink airglow in the air as well. So it's just something to think about when you're taking pictures. If you think you're getting a lot of camera noise, it's probably airglow. If you're seeing that red and green pattern, it's most likely airglow, and just try to bring it out more in processing. So any questions actually before I get onto clouds?
We're good on Rumble Talk.
Okay. So here's a satellite image of the time period that I was going to Easter Island. And you can see there's just so much cloud everywhere, especially over the Pacific Ocean. But of course, like whenever I know that I'm going somewhere, I'm super excited about going there. I know I'm taking nightscapes. I'm just assuming that the weather is going to work out perfectly for me. So, which is kind of funny. So of course I get to Easter Island and I get this kind of condition, constant clouds. And the thing is, on Easter Island, if I looked into it more, then I probably would have realized that, maybe it's going to be more of a hit and miss scenario. They have like ocean currents, two different ocean currents that tend to collide, and then in this particular area, there's a frontal boundary quasi-stationary frontal boundary that sometimes sits right over them for days, and you get a lot of high cloud. And sometimes during the daytime, you will see this high cloud in the distance, and then it might go over, meander north and south of the island. And basically during the daytime, it can be so deceiving because when we see these kind of nice, beautiful, puffy white clouds during the day, we think that, okay, you know, daytime heating is causing it. And then once the sun goes down, we will see some clear skies. But if you look in the distance, you could see this high cloud in the distance with impeding showers and thunderstorms. During the later part of the day, you could start to see more high cloud is moving in. And at this point, I was thinking, oh boy, it's going to be a challenge tonight if I'm going to be taking pictures of the night sky. And then, of course, like this is getting closer to, this is after sunset, even more clouds now, and they were getting lower. And then, of course, at nighttime, it was almost completely overcast. So at this point here, I was still taking pictures, even though like there were times when it was completely cloudy. And I know I had some friends with me and they're thinking, what is Kerry taking pictures of constantly? You know, there's nothing to take pictures of. So, but the thing is that I was just hoping for some holes in the sky, holes in the clouds, to be able to put these holes in the sky together in post processing to get a bigger patch of sky that will show more stars. So I'll show you like through the night or through that period of time. I think this was maybe over a half an hour period of time. You could see the clouds are moving, and I get a little bit more of a glimpse of the stars, and a little bit more here. Sometimes I had a bigger patch, sometimes smaller patch, and then over here. So then I figure, okay, I'm going to put those frames together, and I put them into Photoshop, lined everything up, and used some masking tools to be able to reveal the parts of the frames that had clear skies. And then with that final image, I was able to get this picture here. So the pink nebulosity is part of the Bernard's Loop here. You could see there's Betelgeuse. This is Orion, so 3 stars in the belt. And yeah, so I mean, the goal here for this image overall was to get all of Orion, but that particular night I just focused on this one little area and was able to get enough clear holes to put together to create this one image. And now in terms of clouds, like here at home, this is another problem that we face regularly through the winter, especially in the Great Lakes, where we have the cold air flowing over the Great Lakes, and then that produces a lot of lake effect. And then just when, in this particular picture here, you can see this is a cold front. So just when this cold front goes through, you think you're going to get some clear skies, everything's going to be good, but then that's when the cold air rushes in over the Great Lakes, and then you start getting like even more cloud cover. So that's basically kind of the scenario for the winter, other than getting, you know, big lows from Texas and Colorado. I mean, even just getting cold fronts, you still will get that colder air rushing in behind, and then sometimes you'll have days of low cloud and even some lingering flurries. So this is typically what my night sky looks like for most of the winter. But anyway, so back in, I think this was 2008, Jay Gabani produced this image of the Conan-Foxford Nebula, and it inspired my friend Stefano Cancelli and I to be able to try producing this type of image. And we all know this Conan-Foxford. Well, most of us know that this is a winter target, and with our type of weather and also our light pollution, we thought like, this would be a really difficult task, but we really wanted to make it work. So Steph, now he lives right in Toronto, so he has extreme light pollution. And then where I live, the light pollution is like it's suburban, but we knew that with my setup, I could get some good color data because I have less light pollution than him. My gear at the time wasn't very good, but we figured we could probably work as much with the color data and then layer it in with his data, which would be primarily hydrogen alpha. And from the city, as you know, you can do hydrogen alpha targets very well. And he also had a better setup at the time. So this was basically what I got with my 80mm telescope at the time. So that's what I was using. And it doesn't look too pretty, but things got a little bit better. So processing that 80mm image, this is what I got. Still not the best, but we're still hoping. And then Steph got this hydrogen alpha image. Actually, it's 2 panels, and he was using an FS 102 Takahashi and also an ST10 camera, mono camera. And so his quality of data was so much better. And of course, my data was pretty bad. Even though I was able to get some color, it was just still not very good. So this was like the first part of the year. And we put the 2 images together, the 80mm telescope shot with the hydrogen alpha data, and we got this. And then later on that year, I decided I'd use my 6-inch Schmidt Cassegrain. So imaging the same area again, still not looking too good. But in this particular image, I was pretty surprised to see some yellows here, some yellow reflection nebulosity, probably from these yellow stars. And here it is layered into that hydrogen alpha data that Steph produced. And then it was like another year where I ended up upgrading my telescope setup and also my camera. I believe this was a QHY8 that I was using. And I ended up doing a 2-panel with the 8-inch RC. So it's getting a little bit better now, what I'm able to produce. And here's the processed color image. It still kind of looks a little bit sketchy, but it's getting there. And this is fully processed color data from my location. And then now layering in his hydrogen alpha data, we were able to get this. Oh, actually, I supplemented some of the data from my 6-inch telescope to get more of the yellows in, some of the yellow nebulosity that I wasn't able to get with the 8-inch telescope. And then layering in his hydrogen alpha, it wasn't looking too good. We just had to really work on the post-processing because, as you know, HARGB is really tricky to process because it's very easy to get this kind of salmon color. But working through it and a lot of communication back and forth, we were able to get a better image over time. And this took a couple of years of acquiring data. And of course, as you can see, like over those couple of years, my setup changed. His setup pretty much stayed the same. But so this final image here is basically a collaboration, two different setups, actually 3 different setups, and under less than ideal conditions, under light pollution, and also under a lot of cloud cover during the winter. So you don't have to, when you start taking a photo of a target, you don't have to get it finished all in one shot or in one season. In this case, you could see it took us a few years to accomplish this task. And this one got a NASA APOD in 2010, so we're really happy about that one. So yeah, basically it was 65 subs, 5 minutes on the cone, and 57 times 5 minutes on the Foxbur. With the QHY8, I used my 8-inch telescope, a little bit of the 6-inch as well. So in total, and then his FS102 with his ST10, in total, the exposure time was 17 hours and 20 minutes. So it over 2 winters. Any questions?
We're good over here. How you doing,
Okay.
Tolga?
There are a lot of compliments on your images, so
Yeah, we get a few
Thanks,
here
guys.
too.
Thanks
Yeah.
a lot. Thanks.
But no questions, but everybody's saying how beautiful your images are, and about your composition and target selection.
Okay, no, thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate that. So here's just another example of clouds. A few more examples. With star trails, I remember this particular night, I set up to try to get the star trails around Polaris, and the clouds moved in towards the end of the night. And I kind of like the effect of this one because it looked like, the clouds were cradling the stars. So that's what I call this. Like when I entered this image into a photo competition, I called it cradling the stars. And then this particular shot over here on the right, that was taken in Easter Island this past January. And of course, you know that we had a lot of poor weather conditions to deal with. And this was another time when I was basically just taking pictures and just hoping and hoping that I could get a clear patch of sky. And then luckily, the clouds parted over the Eta Carina, and then I got a little bit of the Southern Cross as well down in the bottom here. So it's funny because in this case, I really think the clouds added something to the image because it helps you focus your attention on the highlight, which is the Eta Carina Nebula. And another thing that the clouds can do that's interesting is you get some irisation. So basically, when high cloud moves in and you have a nice bright moon or even the sun, the ice crystals in the high clouds, they refract the light in a certain way that causes this beautiful halo. And this was just taken in my backyard. And you can see some stars poking through, but the highlight was basically trying to get a composition with the trees and the halo. And here's another example of moon irisation. So, when a weather system is moving in, you get your really high cloud and then you get some mid-level cloud. In this case, this was like high cirrocumulus cloud. And, you could still take some pictures. So I believe like for this one, I had to layer in a shorter exposure of the moon to get some detail in the moon because as you know, like with this type of exposure, if I wanted to expose to get more of the cloud cover and the color, I had to expose for a longer period of time, but then I had to expose for a shorter period of time for the moon. So I layered that in for that particular shot. And then here is what I got from the partial solar eclipse in the summer of 2017. We had some cloud cover. I wasn't really worried about it because I saw the types of clouds that we were getting, and they looked like they were really clouds that were very were moving fairly quickly. So I knew if I could just keep clicking on the shutter, I'll get that moment where the clouds frame the sun and the moon just right. So any questions before we move on to extreme heat?
Good here.
Okay, cool. So extreme heat, that's another problem that we face. And this is just an example of what happens under high temperatures. So this is my Canon 40D sensor at -16. And then to the right is the same camera at 20 degrees Celsius. And this is what we face in the summertime. So back last year in June, I went to Death Valley. I know it's not a great time to go, but this particular location in the Mesquite Valley, in the sand dunes, it was extremely hot, probably one of the highest temperatures that I've ever experienced in my life at nighttime. And this was even after midnight. It felt like it was 38. I believe it was 38 degrees Celsius, and there was a wind, and I was sweating. And at the time, when I was taking pictures, I wasn't even thinking about the sensor, the potential noise that I was going to get on the sensor. But the Milky Way was so incredible, probably the best Milky Way I've ever seen. But zooming in, you can see when I'm starting to boost up the shadows for this image to show more of the landscape, you can start to see more noise, color noise down in the bottom. But there you can see it a little bit better zoomed in. But then with Lightroom, they have a lot of nice tools for noise reduction. And with this one, just a simple reduction in noise and color noise helped it clean it up a fair amount. And then also another trick that I noticed was with the dehaze filter, using it as a graduated filter, I was able to smooth out the noise even more and kind of give more of a mystical or ethereal effect with that. And I also lowered the saturation just a little bit more. So you could see things look a little bit smoother down here. And also I noticed too, Lightroom has a tool for adding grain. It's not showing up in this example, but I added a little bit of grain, and for some reason that added a little bit more structure to some of the objects that lost its structure when I was doing the dehazing and the noise reduction. So here's the final image from that. So it was almost going to be a tossed out image, and just working with a little further with Lightroom, and this is after some Photoshop work, of course, but Lightroom really helped a lot with reducing some of that noise by using the color reduction, noise reduction, and also the dehaze filter, and then adding a little bit of grain, believe it or not, helped recover some of the structure in the objects. And for going further along with clouds, this was just another shot from Easter Island. I haven't published this one yet. I still don't know if I like it. It's pretty noisy as well. But I like this because the clouds in this case really help. Like there's such a contrast with the clouds and the sky, and it really brings your attention to the sky. If there were no clouds here, then you kind of lose some amount of appreciation for the depth of the night sky, I think. Obviously, it would be nice if it was perfect sky, but with some clouds, it can still add some interest. So any questions about extreme heat?
No, just a lot of compliments. I like your work.
Yeah, same here. Everybody's saying quite a variety of locations. Love the presentation.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
you're doing good then.
Okay, thank you.
Carrie,
So, yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
How does the noise reduction tools in Lightroom compared to noise reduction tools, say, in PixInsight?
I haven't really used the PixInsight noise reduction tools, so I can't speak about that. When I use PixInsight, I do very specific things. For instance, I do my calibration there, and I'll remove the gradients and certain cosmetic things, but then I end up doing a lot more work in noise reduction in Photoshop and Lightroom. So sorry, I can't talk about that. But I'm sure it's good. It's just for me, I like the flexibility that I feel that I get with Photoshop, and it's just a matter of personal preference. And I'm sure if I had more practice with the PixInsight for noise reduction, then I could work with it a little bit more and be able to tell. But there's also lots of plugins for Photoshop that does a really nice job with noise reduction, like the Nix software. And I heard Luminar 3 has an amazing noise reduction, or sorry, the Skyloom software team has an amazing noise reduction plugin that you can use in Photoshop. But I believe the Skyloom software noise reduction tool only works on Mac. Anyway, so moving on to sky darkness. So sky darkness can be a problem if you have too much light or too little light. So on the left side, there are a bunch of snapshots of some epic failed exposures when I was in the sand dunes um, in the Mesquite Valley, in the Death Valley. So there were actually a lot of people in this area even after midnight, and so every time I exposed, there was some kind of light going off, red light or white light, car lights in the in the parking lot. And then on the right side, there was a case where I actually didn't have enough light at all to be able to produce a nightscape. So this particular location was in Kings Canyon, and this is the Grizzly Falls, and you can't see any falls at all. Um, but I tried to expose as long as I could here just to try to see if I can bring out the falls, and I couldn't get anything. And we take for granted how much light the sky produces, the starlight produces. In this location, it was so dark because there are so many trees around, and it was blocking so much of that starlight. So this is a 5-minute exposure, and you could see even with that, it was very difficult to see the falls. And I ended up just having to deal with a lot of noise in this particular frame. So I abandoned it when I was processing it. But I had my friend Yuri was with me, and we both don't subscribe to doing any type of light painting. But in this case, he was flashing his his flashlight all over the place, and I was just exposing whenever I could. And I was thinking that with his flashlight going off in different locations of the image, I will eventually capture, um, be able to put the frames together with the different locations of the light that he added, and blend it together and hopefully get something that's a little bit natural, on the more natural side for a nightscape image. So you could see here's some of the frames that I was able to capture with that. It doesn't look very good, but I was just going to take my chances and see what will happen in post processing. So, and then I think the final image is coming up. Yeah, so this is the final image that I was able to get from all that light painting from the flashlight. It was very careful light painting, applied very lightly, because if you add too much light painting, then you can get a very unnatural effect. So with this one, it ended up working out better than I believe doing an extremely long exposure for just the land. And then moving forward into the light pollution, this is basically where I live. I didn't talk about this that much, like what type of light pollution I have. But where I am located, I have 3 big cities around me. So Hamilton, and then across the lake is Toronto, and then St. Catharines and Buffalo are towards my east. So I've got like 3 light domes, but being in the middle of it, I still can see magnitude 5.7 on the sky quality meter. That's about 20.2 on the sky quality meter, and I could see stars down to 5.7 near zenith. So the Milky Way is pretty washed out, and I get those light domes. And we've just found over time, like as we're tracking our sky quality meter, that the light pollution changes a fair amount. This is like we made a table of the mean nightly darkest sky reading. So this is the average darkest sky reading, and you could see that most of our darker are nights where we have the highest sky quality meter reading, which is basically our darkest nights, tend to be towards the summer months. And then in the winter, it's definitely a little bit brighter in the night sky. And this is we believe is because there's more leaves on the trees in the summer months. So that cuts down on some of the light pollution from the street lights getting up into the night sky. And here's a graph showing the extreme dark sky reading. So our best nights are typically again in the summer months, but we sometimes do get some good nights in the winter, and but under specific conditions. And those specific conditions pertain to cloud cover, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But also, snow on the ground also affects the readings heavily. So you could see whenever there's snow on the ground, we get lower readings, lower sky darkness, and no snow on the ground, you get darker skies. And this pertains to anyone that lives in an area with that gets snow. You're going to be getting your worst light pollution when after a snowfall. And here's just an example of when we got our extremely high sky quality meter reading, and this was in the winter actually. But what happened here wasn't because of the leaves, and there was likely no snow on the ground at this time. But what happened was there was low cloud and fog that covered up the town and St. Catharines, Hamilton, and Toronto. So our three major sources of light pollution, they were covered with low cloud, but somehow we were high enough on the ridge that we were able to get clear skies that night. So that's why we got some really good sky darkness. So that's also something to consider when you are in a light polluted area to if you pay attention closely to the weather, if you know there's going to be a lot of overlying like low cloud in the areas that causes your major light pollution, then those nights might give you your best sky quality reading for your best darkest skies. And here's just an example of what my light pollution looks like on a normal night. But then we can combat some of this light pollution either by planning strategically, for not imaging as much when there's snow on the ground, or, imaging when there's cloud cover over the major light domes, major cities, but also using a light pollution filter. So in this case, this is a view without the light pollution filter, and then here's a view with the light pollution filter. So you could see just how much of a difference that can make in your imaging. And in this case, I use the Optolong L Pro clip-in filter for my Canon 6D. Now here's another example of what a filter can do. So this is a 1-minute exposure tracked image from a 100 millimeter lens, f2.8, ISO 3200, Canon 6D. So, and this is looking up at Cygnus, and you can see, faintly see the North American Nebula here. But then with the filter, you could see a little bit more contrast. And I'm not using a modified camera here. So you can even see some more nebulosity in this whole region. And then processing with that filter, this is still that single exposure, a 1-minute exposure, you could see a lot more nebulosity. So the light pollution filter helps immensely, not just for light pollution, but it also helps with increasing the contrast if you're using a camera that's non-modified. But also, if you can imagine, if you do have a modified camera, then the contrast will be even more. But I'm just saying this because it helps with the light pollution, but also some people might feel the urge to modify their camera. But you can get really nice results when you use a light pollution filter and to bring out some of that red hydrogen data that is oftentimes lost with unmodified cameras. And so also with the light pollution, I've just figured out some tips over time. Um, for instance, this one is a dark, dusty target in Cepheus, and I love these kind of targets, and I've always thought they were out of reach for me in my light polluted area. But uh, definitely taking images, like multiple images over the course of a season, even multiple years, really helps because you get so much integration time. Here is these are 10-minute sub exposures totaling up to 12 hours with my 8-inch telescope in the SBIG 8300. And one thing I do is I make sure that I image these kinds of low contrast targets when it's 2 hours before or after the meridian flip. So just don't be tempted to start taking pictures when the target rises above the horizon. Just wait a little bit and plan your sessions so that you wait till the target is nice and high. And I go with the longer sub exposures. I think that helps out a lot. And like I mentioned before, multiple years and multiple nights. And also under light pollution, you can still see stars. So here's this one of the, I was on kind of doing a project by taking stars and flowers at the same time. And of course, it's a bit of a challenge because, if you're not focus stacking, um, you have to deal with the stars being blurry, or the flowers being more in focus. So you have kind of that depth of field issue to deal with. But I just thought it would be cool to get some closer up images of the flowers with the stars. In this case, believe it or not, I used f11 and about a 35-second exposure, and I was still able to see the stars and a little bit of the Milky Way. And I was using um, the Canon 17 to 40 millimeter lens for this. So it wasn't even a really expensive, fancy lens to use. But anyways, I was able to get this one shot, and then I was on a bit of a roll and I caught some more images with that, with using that lens. And oh yeah, also for these particular images, I did use an old 3rd generation iPod. The screen, I use the screen to kind of light up the underside of the flower ever so slightly, just to get that, so I can get a bit more a nicer dynamics with the image overall. And here's another shot. So even though the Milky Way isn't that bright or striking, you're still able to see stars, and if you can make a nice composition, then you're good. And then here's another star trail image, and star trails, you can do that pretty much anywhere. If you have light pollution, no problem at all. And you can see, like in this particular image, there's lights on, like my neighbors had their lights on. My husband had his light on in the office. It was just really bright. And I believe the moon was actually up because you could see it shining on the dome. So light pollution, not a problem for star trails. And then this particular shot was taken in Toronto at the Humber Bay. So right in the red zone. And, we had actually, I was running a master class with Yuri Beletsky this particular night. And we were planning on just shooting the skyline, but we got so lucky with the weather, and it was February, because most of the time in February you have a lot of cloud cover. But we were lucky this night to get some clear skies, and the moon unfortunately was shining off off the screen here, and it lit up. It actually was pretty nice. It lit up the ground and the trees a little bit, but we were able to see Orion. So, I mean, you don't need to worry about if this is a pretty populated area in the city, and I was still able to get some constellation shots and some star shots. So it's definitely possible. Here's another example. This particular location is south of Hamilton in Binbrook, and the light pollution there is actually getting worse and worse. So this is a single exposure image of it, but then over if you what I decided to do, this was back in 2008. I decided to stack single exposures of the sky with and then add the exposure of the land separately. And I was in the same location. I did move my camera. I was basically just acquiring images specifically for the sky and specifically for the land. And with stacking, it also helped a lot with getting rid of some of the light pollution. And this was one of my final images, keeping in mind this is a very old shot back in 2008. And this got the NASA astronomy picture of the day. And it's kind of makes me laugh because I got a lot of people sending me emails after this got published. And they're asking me where it is. And people were saying they want to skinny dip there and all this. And I had to tell them it's south of Hamilton, south of the steel town city. But anyways, I just wanted to highlight here that with light pollution and some stacking, some processing, you can definitely get a decent Milky Way image. And any questions so far?
Well, I have a small question.
Yep.
You mentioned the masterclass with Yuri.
Yes.
You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. So basically, we did a masterclass. Actually, we've done a few masterclasses, but this particular one we did in February, and we just basically talk about our workflow in nightscapes, and we talk about equipment and how we actually execute the imaging. And it was a full day workshop or master class, and we did some shooting at the end of it. And we do hope to do more of them in the future, especially if there's some interest in your particular town or city. Just let us know, drop us a line, and we'll come out and we'll share our techniques with you. And there's no secrets. We tell you all. It's several 4 hours of post processing from my perspective and then his perspective, and just trying to get everyone to take the best images that they can. And and then also we have we're hoping to do the 2020 solar eclipse in Chile. That's in December. So December 2020. So if you're interested in any workshops, or if you want us to come out to your city, just drop me a line, and we'll see if there's enough numbers, we'll come out. And just plugging myself here. So I'm at Weather and Sky on all social media. Instagram, I have most of my images on Instagram. And Facebook, I try to be active on there as well. Twitter, I kind of tweet about weather and nightscapes as well. And then YouTube, it's something that I hope to get the courage to kind of build a little bit further. Right now, I have a lot of flying videos and a couple of nightscape or deep sky slideshows on there. But if you're interested in seeing me on YouTube, send me a line and try to encourage me, because right now I'm not really a YouTube type person, but I will try to do it if there's interest. Anyway, so that's it. I have a couple of links here, some links that you might want to take note of, and that might help. And I also have some web pages. I don't know if you wanted me to show that.
So
it's fine. Go ahead and show.
Okay, I'll just shut this down.
You can send me an email.
Okay.
You can show them on the screen, but also if you can send me an email, I'll put them on the description of the video.
Okay,
so
sure.
click on the links.
I was wondering, did you want to see a time lapse of one of the images that I took? It's like 1 minute long.
Sure, go for
Do
it.
we have time?
What
Okay,
we've got, yeah, this thing goes on forever. And you've still got a high
Is
audience count
everyone
from what
still
I've gathered.
awake?
So yeah.
Okay, so here we go. This is just a time lapse, a couple before and afters, and then a time lapse of one of the images that that we saw earlier.
Do you sing during these?
So, did you hear the music with that?
No, I didn't pick up the music. I
Oh,
didn't hear it.
darn.
Sorry. Did you guys hear any music? I didn't.
No,
Okay, anyways.
the sound didn't come through.
I was just hoping you'd sing or
Okay.
something.
Oh, that's why you said that.
Yes, because there was no sound. It
Oh
was quiet.
gosh. Sorry. I could have even narrated a little bit there. Anyway, that was just a before and after of one of those shots, and just to see what kind of work that goes into it. And you know, we teach that as well. Like all those techniques that you saw in fast motion, we would teach that in the master classes. Also, next link, I'll just quickly show. This is where I work, the Weather Network, and I'm a meteorologist there. And of course, I'm going to plug them just a little bit. If you're in Canada or the US, we produce forecasts for you, hourly forecasts, and out to 14 days. And there's a neat little tool, Future Radar tool, where we show you current radar, but also future radar, which is a pretty cool technology. So that can also help with your imaging planning. Also, there's some websites that I like to use as well, like the CO College of DuPage has some really nice tools. You get different models. If one day I mean, if you invite me back and if I'm allowed to talk about this further, I could kind of describe, like explain how to forecast your own weather or help you forecast weather for your imaging sessions. We have a lot of different model data to choose from and a different types of fields to look at, and going out to even 48 hours or even you know, 5-7 days. Environment Canada has a website that has the cloud forecast, the seeing forecast, and the sky transparency. Keeping in mind the sky transparency forecast doesn't include smoke, it's mainly just moisture due to clouds. And yeah, so basically take a look at that. There's also the satellite imagery you're going to want to look at before your night of imaging, and just keep an eye on things. Even infrared you might want to look at as well, because that's where you will see your high level cloud. This is more of the nighttime view that you would be looking for. So all this high cloud, like for instance, in this particular area, you can see this really wispy high cloud. I can guarantee you a lot of these people on the ground here will look up and see clear skies. They will not notice this. And this is the kind of stuff that you want to look for before you do any type of imaging, especially deep sky targets that are low contrast. And then I'll just show you my Instagram page, and pretty much that's it. And then sometimes, oh, there's another National Weather Service I have up here, the frontal maps. And yeah, basically that's it, guys.
Thank you so much, Kerry. And I've got to say that, yes, you are invited back. You obviously have one heck of a lot more knowledge in that brainy brain of yours about meteorology. And I want you to do a presentation for your fans. And you just made a whole lot of more fans tonight.
Oh, okay.
I want you to do a presentation about what I, as an astroimager, needs to know about the weather.
Yes.
Linda, for instance, wants to know, she's asking Kerry, the meteorologist. Lately, we've been getting a lot of clear days in the DC area, but the clouds up as soon as the sun goes down. Is this a coincidence or is this a common weather pattern?
I'm not familiar with that that area's weather, but sometimes during sundown, especially if you're along coastal areas, you could get some fog, and then that might lift into low-level cloud. So it could be anything. So I'd have to take a look at that particular area. But if it's not weather pattern related, then it could be a local effect. And sometimes a lot of the local effects deal with coastal fog or, valley fog, that kind of thing. And then it typically might lift during the morning, and you wake up in the morning and you just see a blanket of low cloud. And eventually that burns off during the day.
Okay.
Kerry, stop sharing your screen if you can.
Okay.
Yeah, because all you're doing is getting me again. And
okay, what do I do? Oh, do I?
Yeah.
Just click stop sharing.
And if it's still, yeah, you might need to go escape.
Oh, okay. I think I know what you're talking about. Let's see.
Yeah. Otherwise, I see me twice.
Stop sharing. I got it.
Yeah.
There
we go.
Okay.
Now you're back.
Yes.
Tolga, you got any questions on the board there?
Oh
yeah, we
no,
just
I don't have any questions on YouTube. If you guys have any questions, please hurry up and put them in right now.
Okay.
There are a lot of compliments. I mean, the chat is full of nice.
Thanks
And did you, Kerry, did you clean up your office space back there somehow before the show?
Yes, I
Yeah,
had
okay.
to. I dusted and I moved things around. I hid things in certain parts underneath the desk, everywhere.
We were all kidding before the show.
I know,
So,
but
okay.
it was a disaster in here.
Guys, we're going to have to be checking out. If you got all your questions in. Yes, Kerry, you do have to come back and tell us how to read a weather map or 10 weather maps, to all the different ones.
Yeah,
you also pilot, aren't you, Kerry?
Yes, I fly.
Don't you fly.
I fly small planes. Cessna.
Yeah.
Low wing, single engine. Yes.
Yes, I'm going to. So there's a question about give us the links. So what's going to happen is that Kerry's going to send me an email with all the links that she included in her presentation, and I'm going to put them on the bottom of the YouTube video in the description or more information part.
And Kerry, in that information someplace will be information about those master classes you and who is it, Yuri have?
Yeah, well, right now we don't have, we're working on a website, but in the meantime, if anyone's interested in master classes, just send me a personal message, direct message me on Instagram or even Facebook and say you want to be added to the list to know when we're having master classes, and we'll send out an email to you to let you know in the meantime while we're getting our website going.
Okay.
So especially if you're interested in 2020 eclipse, let me know as well. Just drop me a line. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and all those channels. Weather and Sky, at Weather and Sky.
Okay. Kerry, don't forget, you can stay on and stay in the room after we sign off, which is coming up momentarily here. We've got all the questions, right, Tolga? All the questions are out there?
Yes.
Then I'm going to say good night and see you next week. Come on back and hope to catch us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel because it helps us out in the long run. And thanks so much again, Kerry. You got lots of compliments. You'll enjoy reading through them later. Okay. And I'm going to push the stop broadcast button, and those of you in the room can turn your mics back on and we can visit again. Bye-bye, everybody out there.